Welcome all to my new series on AWS Lambda tutorials. In this series, I'll cover everything about AWS Lambda functions, from theory to how we actually write Lambda functions in our production environments. So this video is all about theory on AWS Lambda. So let's get started. Lambda is very popular event-driven and on-demand compute service from AWS. This is serverless compute service that lets you run your code without provisioning or managing server. You simply have to just upload your code and AWS takes care of the rest. It automatically provisions the necessary number of servers, manages those servers and runs your code. You just pay for the compute time you use and there are no charges when your code isn't running, unlike EC2. Also, AWS takes care of maintaining the OS, doing the necessary patching activity, capacity provisioning and automatically scaling. So Lambda is a FaaS offering, which is function as a service. With FaaS, we deploy our code as independent functions and we configure those functions to be called or triggered. So Lambda supports all famous runtime languages. Python and Node are very famous nowadays. These both are supported. Go is also there. Then we have Java, PowerShell, Ruby and C#. For Java, you have to upload your code to Lambda. Earlier there was provision to write your code inside the Lambda console, but that has been removed. Lambda integrates very well with other AWS services, be it API Gateway, DynamoDB, step functions, Kinesis, data lakes, code pipeline. So with Lambda and other serverless offerings such as DynamoDB, API Gateway and S3, you can make a complete serverless application. Let's move on. Let's look at the pricing model for Lambda. As with other serverless applications, you are only charged for your usage. So the charges are for the number of requests. One request is nothing but one invocation of the Lambda. Then we have memory, how much memory is specified in the Lambda function. And then duration of the code execution. So you are billed per millisecond. Let's look at the numbers. For every 1 million requests, you are charged only 20 cents. And you are charged this much amount for every GB per second. I'll give you the link of Cost Explorer tool below in the description. So you can put in the number of requests, your memory and duration, and you will get to know how much you will be charged for the Lambda. You also get free tier quota for Lambda function, which is 1 million requests per month and 400,000 GB second of compute quota. So these are very good resources. If you are starting with the Lambda, you can try Lambda out in your free tier and you will not be charged. Let's look at the Lambda invocations. So there are two ways by which you can invoke your Lambda function. The first one is synchronous invocation, which is a request response model. Here you can invoke the Lambda from CLI, SDK or from the different AWS services. So it will respond you back with the response. This is pretty straightforward. You can mention your Lambda URI inside CLI or from your SDK and you'll directly call the Lambda function. It will respond you back. The second type and the most popular is asynchronous invocation. So this is also known as event-based invocation. Here your Lambda will be invoked based on an event. An example of event is shown in the diagram. You put one object in S3 and for every object upload, Lambda will be invoked. Other services that could invoke Lambda asynchronously are SNS, SQS, then CloudWatch, Logs, EventBridge, AWS Code Commit, Code Pipeline, then we have IoT events. Basically, you can create any type of event in AWS and as a target, you can invoke the Lambda function. Let's cover some of the resource limitations that we have with Lambda. The most important of all is the time for which we can run the code, which is 15 minutes or 900 seconds. If your Lambda is taking more than that, it will be shut down. That is why it is important that your code should be stateless. So in future videos, I'll show you how can you check the pending time in your Lambda function so that you can save your process output and you can invoke another Lambda. So the second resource limitation is the memory. You can provision memory from 128 MB to 10 GB. That's pretty much memory you have. So before reInvent 2020, we had only 3 GB as the max memory. The next is concurrency in Lambda. So the concurrent Lambda functions that we can run in AWS is 1000. So this is a soft limit which can be increased by raising AWS support ticket. Then we have limitation of invocation payload. So for synchronous invocation, we have limit of 6 MB, and for asynchronous, we have limit of 256 KB. The next is ephemeral storage that you get with Lambda. The local volume storage for Lambda is 512 MB, which is there in its temp folder. You can describe temp folder in the Lambda code and you'll get to know its size. Now this temp storage is provisioned once you create Lambda function and deleted once the Lambda finishes. So this is like local hard disk for Lambda function. You can say a writable file system. Let's just take one example, like if you are doing some operation on a CSV file and you have to download a CSV file to a temporary storage, then you have 512 MB for that. So you can download the file into your temp directory, but you have to keep in mind that this temp directory will be deleted. Anyway, we have 10 GB as the main memory with Lambda, so it's better to perform in-memory operations rather than downloading the file into the ephemeral storage, which you can lose. Now let's look at the monitoring services that we have and how we can monitor our Lambda function with that. So the first one is CloudWatch. CloudWatch automatically monitors Lambda functions on your behalf. Through CloudWatch, it reports different metrics such as number of requests, execution duration, the number of requests resulting in error, and many other metrics. So if you go to monitoring tab in Lambda function, so you will see a lot of graphs available there, and all those metrics are available in CloudWatch. And by default, all the logs are also written in the CloudWatch. So a log group is automatically created for every Lambda function. Okay. Let me show you example of CloudWatch monitoring with Lambda. So when you open Lambda console, and you'll see one tab here which is monitoring. When you click on monitoring, you see the CloudWatch metrics here. You can see here the number of invocations that we have and duration. Then we have error count and success rate, then throttles, async delivery failures, iterator age. So all these metrics are available in CloudWatch. Apart from this, there is a link here which you can see here, view logs in CloudWatch. If you click here, CloudWatch will open. You can see here that I have a log group created, Event Bridge Lambda. So this one is automatically created whenever your function is invoked for the first time. So the next thing is CloudTrail. You can monitor activity of Lambda functions with CloudTrail. Any action taken on Lambda function, be it through SDK or API or console, all are available in CloudTrail. Let me show you example of CloudTrail also. So when you open CloudTrail, you have to go to event history here. So once this is open, this will show you the complete list of all the services and the action taken on the different services. But now we are concerned with Lambda functions. So what you can do is in the drop down, you can choose resource type and search for Lambda here. We are concerned with Lambda function. So once you select this, it will show you all the event history from the past 90 days. You can see that I have a date function code event here. Okay, for the different Lambda function. You can see the resource name here. You can see that on Event Bridge Lambda also I had some operations as a root user. So this is very helpful when you are working in a production environment and you have multiple Lambda functions and you want to see which user performed some action on your Lambda function. And the third tool we have is X-ray, so with which you can analyze and debug Lambda based applications. X-ray link is also visible here in the monitoring section. You can see here. The last one is more of a compliance and audit service with which you can track configuration changes in your Lambda function. So these configuration changes can be runtime environments, basic settings such as memory, if you increase or decrease, or you increase the timeout and change the concurrency settings. So with config, you can get detailed analysis for compliance and audit requirements. Look at the benefits that we have with Lambda. So the first obvious benefit is we don't have to manage the servers. AWS does everything for us. It is not about just provisioning one server. Okay, you have to deal with the security parts, you have to deal with the different patches, you have to install the runtime. But with Lambda, you don't have to think about all these things. Okay. Next one is automatic high availability. You don't have to manage the high availability yourself. So Lambda does it for you. So it is by default highly available service from AWS. Then we have convenient integrations. You can very conveniently integrate Lambda with other AWS services, be it S3, DynamoDB, or step functions, Kinesis. You can very easily integrate Lambda. Whenever you see a complex architecture built on AWS services, then Lambda would be the most obvious part of that architecture. Then the fourth benefit is pay as you use model. So you will not be charged for the idleness of your code. Okay, and the millisecond metering is also very lucrative option that we have. Okay, so let's say that if your server runs for 100 milliseconds, then you will be charged only for that. Okay, unlike EC2 where you are charged once you provision your EC2, even if you don't do anything on that EC2. Let's look at the limitations of Lambda functions. So the first one is not efficient for long running applications. Obviously we know that the max time for Lambda function is 15 minutes. So if your application is taking more than that, it will be stopped. So you cannot provision Lambda function for the long running applications. Obviously there are some workarounds that you can do. For example, calling another Lambda functions when your first Lambda function finishes, and then again you can create a chain of Lambda functions. And let's say that if your application is taking 45 minutes, then you can spawn 3 different Lambda functions at different intervals, but you have to make sure that your application is stateless, and once your Lambda function is finishing its time, then you have to store the state of your application. So the second point is it is only good for stateless applications. If it's shut down, then all your memory and the physical storage is lost. So you cannot keep your outputs in the Lambda functions. You have to store them somewhere, be it DynamoDB or RDS or S3 or any other storage system. The next one is debugging. Debugging is very difficult on Lambda because AWS manages the compute services for you, leaving you just the responsibility for the code. You cannot log into the instance or customize the OS. And the fourth is the very important cold start issue. So it is a well-known fact that Lambda cold start happens when you execute inactive functions. The delay is actually due to AWS needs some time to provision your runtime container, and then you can run the Lambda function. So if you're not about what cold start issue is, this is nothing but the delay in handling the first request. So if you think about Lambda, this is a compute service, right? So at the back end, it needs to spawn a server and install your runtime on that so that you can run your code. Okay, so the very first time when you invoke a Lambda function, it takes some time to provision these two resources, and subsequent requests are handled flawlessly. Okay, so this cold start issue generally happens for your first request. Then we have limitation of code upload that we can do. For the compressed code, it should be less than 50 MB, and the uncompressed code should be less than 250 MB. Now let's look at how Lambda fits in an application architecture. First, we have to upload our code to AWS Lambda or write. Then we can set up the invocation here. Once the event is generated or synchronous invocation happens, then Lambda is invoked. Here Lambda runs your code and you just pay for the compute time that our code uses. So this is a very plain and simple architecture. Okay, the first step, you upload the code. Second step, any service will invoke our Lambda function, then our code will be executed, then we'll be charged for our code. Let's look at one real-time use case. So here we are talking about real-time file processing. Generally what happens is when you upload one image to, let's say, FB, then FB generates a thumbnail image also, which is visible in our profile picture, right? This is a classic example of that kind of architecture. Let's just say that a photograph is once uploaded to Facebook, it is stored to S3 bucket. So whenever S3 bucket put object happens, Lambda event is triggered. So inside our Lambda function, we have written a code to resize the image to change it to thumbnail. So once this is done, it again saves that to S3, and that image can be used to display the pictures on our mobile phones or tablets or on the laptops. So this is a very good use case that many organizations are using. So let's talk about the new features that were introduced at reInvent 2020. First is we already covered. So we have up to 10 GB of memory now. With the memory, they have increased the virtual CPU, which are 6 now for each Lambda execution. Then they added support for containers also. This feature is most welcomed by the serverless community. And then the fourth one is we have billing per millisecond now. Earlier it was 100 millisecond. So these are very good features that we have for Lambda. Now what I'll cover in my future videos. The first one is Lambda Edge. Then I'll cover the container support that is recently introduced. Then how do we use this feature, concurrency scaling in Lambda. Then we have Lambda layers. So these are very good topics that every developer or architect should be aware about. I'll cover these features in my future videos. So stay tuned for that, guys. And thanks for watching this video.